The avoidant just experienced their most devastating loss, and it's entirely their own fault. This isn't about you taking revenge or playing games. This is about you finally walking away, and the avoidant realizing too late what they lost. They've ended relationships before. They've pushed people away repeatedly. But losing you hits different because you weren't supposed to leave. You were the one who stayed through everything. You were patient when they withdrew. You were understanding when they were cold. You accommodated their patterns when anyone else would have walked away years ago. The avoidant got comfortable in that dynamic where they could do whatever they wanted and you'd still be there when they decided to come back. But then you stopped participating in that dance. You didn't fight harder. You didn't chase anymore. You didn't try to convince them of your worth or prove your love one more time. You just quietly chose yourself and left them with the consequences of their behavior. This is the biggest L they've ever taken because it's the first time their patterns cost them someone they actually wanted to keep, someone they assumed would always be there. Every other loss they could rationalize away. Every other person who left they could blame or dismiss as not understanding them. But you understood them completely, gave them space, met them with patience and compassion, and still chose to leave. That's the loss that's going to haunt them for years, because there's no defense against it, no way to minimize it, no story they can tell themselves that makes it hurt less. The self-inflicted wound reality. The avoidant is sitting with the knowledge that they did this to themselves. They can't blame you for being too needy because you gave them all the space they claim to need. They can't accuse you of not understanding because you educated yourself on their patterns and met them with compassion and patience. They can't say you didn't try because you tried for months or years longer than most people would have. Every defense the avoidant usually uses to protect themselves from accountability falls apart when applied to you. You were the exception to every excuse they've ever made about why relationships don't work. You proved that the problem wasn't other people being too much. The problem was the avoidant being unable to receive what was being offered. And they still managed to lose you through their own repeated choices to prioritize their patterns over the relationship, over your needs, over the possibility of real connection. This self-inflicted nature of the loss is what makes it so devastating. Subscribe for insights into attachment psychology that help you understand these dynamics and protect yourself from relationships that can't meet your needs. The avoidant can't escape into victimhood. They can't tell themselves they were unlucky, or that you were wrong for them, or that timing was off. They have to sit with the reality that they had something genuinely good and they destroyed it through their own behavior, their own choices, their own inability to be vulnerable. Every withdrawal, every moment of coldness, every time they dismissed your needs, they were building toward this outcome brick by brick. They could have chosen differently at any point, and they consistently chose their defenses over you. Now they're experiencing the consequence of those accumulated choices, and there's no one else to blame, no external factor to point to, no way to avoid the truth that they did this to themselves. The self-inflicted wound also means the avoidant is confronting that their patterns don't protect them. They're supposed to be the ones in control, the ones who leave before they can be left, the ones who maintain power through distance, but their entire strategy backfired. Their patterns didn't protect them from pain. They created it. The avoidant is experiencing the exact hurt they were trying to avoid, made worse by the knowledge that it's their own fault. They played themselves and lost everything in the process. The irreplaceable loss recognition. The avoidant is realizing you weren't just someone they were dating. You were someone rare who possessed qualities they'll never find again. You had patience most people don't have. You had understanding of their psychology that took effort to develop. You had the capacity to love them through their patterns without losing yourself entirely. These aren't common qualities. The avoidant took them for granted because you made it look easy. But now that you're gone, they're confronting how extraordinary you actually were and how unlikely they are to find someone like you again. The irreplaceability becomes clear when the avoidant tries to move on. They might pursue new people or return to old patterns of casual connection. But everyone they meet is measured against what they had with you, and everyone falls short. The new person doesn't understand them the way you did. They don't have your patience when the avoidant withdraws. They don't tolerate the avoidant's patterns without complaint. The avoidant is learning through painful comparison that what they had with you was unique and that their chance to appreciate it has passed. You can't be replaced because the combination of your specific qualities, your understanding of them, and your willingness to work with their limitations doesn't exist in another person. The irreplaceable loss also includes the avoidant recognizing the specific history and intimacy they built with you is gone forever. Even if they find someone else who's patient, that person won't know them the way you knew them. They won't have the shared memories, the inside jokes, the deep familiarity that develops over time. The avoidant is confronting that they didn't just lose a relationship, they lost a witness to their life, someone who saw them fully and still chose to stay until their patterns made staying impossible. That kind of knowing takes years to build, and the avoidant destroyed it in a single pattern of accumulated small abandonments. The power dynamic reversal. The avoidant is experiencing a complete reversal of the power dynamic they maintained throughout the relationship. They were always the one in control through their distance. You pursued, they withdrew. You wanted more, they gave less. The asymmetry kept them feeling safe and powerful. But your leaving flipped the entire dynamic. Now they're the one who wants more and you're the one who's unavailable. They're experiencing what it feels like to be on the other side of their own patterns and they hate it. The pursuing, the uncertainty, the powerlessness they created for you is now their experience and it's unbearable. This reversal is part of why the loss feels so massive. The avoidant isn't just losing the relationship. They're losing their sense of control and superiority. They always believed they were the less invested party, the one who could walk away, the person with more power. But your choice to leave proves they were wrong. You were the one with actual power because you had the strength to choose yourself over a dynamic that wasn't serving you. The avoidant maintained the illusion of power through distance, but you demonstrated real power through decisive action. This recognition is humiliating and devastating for someone whose entire identity is built on not needing anyone. The power reversal also means the avoidant is now in the position of being left and having no recourse. They can't withdraw further because you've already withdrawn completely. They can't use distance to regain control because you're not trying to close the distance. All their usual strategies for managing relationships are useless. The avoidant is experiencing true powerlessness for the first time in their relational life, and it's teaching them what their patterns feel like from the receiving end. The lesson is brutal and exactly what they needed but never would have learned any other way. The future projection horror. The avoidant is looking into their future and seeing the pattern repeating endlessly. They're going to meet new people and run the same patterns. They're going to push away anyone who gets close. They're going to destroy every connection that starts to matter. And every time they're going to compare that person to you and remember that they already lost their best chance at relationship. The future looks bleak because the avoidant is confronting that unless they do serious work to change, they're going to spend their life repeating this cycle of connection and loss. And every future loss will be measured against losing you. The horror includes the avoidant imagining themselves alone years from now, still running the same patterns, still unable to sustain intimacy. They see themselves going through life isolated, defended, safe but profoundly lonely. They understand now that their patterns don't lead to comfortable independence. They lead to chronic emptiness punctuated by brief connections they destroy before they can become meaningful. You represented a possibility for something different, a person patient enough and understanding enough that maybe they could have built something lasting. But they sabotaged that possibility, and now they're staring down a future where that chance won't come again. The future projection also includes the avoidant recognizing that every new relationship will be haunted by what they lost with you. They'll always wonder what if. What if they'd been braver? What if they'd trusted your love? What if they'd chosen vulnerability over defense? These questions will plague them in every future connection because you represented a road not taken, a possibility they rejected through fear. The avoidant will spend years wondering about the relationship they could have had with you if they'd been capable of receiving what you were offering. This wondering becomes its own form of torture, the witness to their pattern's loss. You weren't just a partner. You were someone who understood the avoidance patterns well enough to work with them and call them out when necessary. You were a witness who saw through their defenses and loved them anyway. Losing you means losing someone who could have helped them grow if they'd been willing. You saw their patterns clearly, but didn't shame them for having patterns. You understood where their avoidance came from, but didn't enable it indefinitely. You struck a balance between compassion and boundaries that could have been the container for their healing. But they rejected that opportunity and now it's gone. The loss of witness means the avoidant no longer has someone holding up a mirror to their behavior in a loving way. Future people will either not understand their patterns well enough to see them clearly, or will see them and react with judgment and rejection. What you offered was rare, clear-sighted understanding combined with patience and boundaries. That combination creates the conditions for change, but the avoidant was too defended to use it. Now they're recognizing they lost not just a relationship, but a potential catalyst for their own growth and healing. The witness loss also includes the avoidant realizing that no one else will know their full story the way you did. You understood their childhood wounds, their attachment history, the specific ways their patterns manifested. That deep knowledge took time and emotional labor to develop. The avoidant might find someone new, but that person will be starting from zero in understanding them. The avoidant will have to explain themselves all over again, reveal their wounds to someone new, build trust from nothing. And the whole time they'll remember that they already had this with you, and they threw it away because they couldn't tolerate the vulnerability of being fully known and loved. The comparison to previous losses. The avoidant has lost relationships before, but this one is different in every way that matters. Previous losses happened when they were less self-aware, when they could tell themselves the other person just didn't get it, when they could move on quickly to the next thing. But losing you is different because they know exactly what they're losing and why. They can't pretend you were wrong for them. They can't say you weren't patient enough. They can't rationalize this loss away because you did everything right and they still managed to destroy it. This loss is going to stick with them in ways previous ones didn't because there's no escape from their own culpability. The comparison includes the avoidant recognizing that you were the best they've had and possibly the best they'll ever have. You weren't just good for them in theory. You actually showed up and did the work of loving someone with their patterns. Previous partners might have been good people, but not right for them, or right for them, but not patient enough. But you were both. You were compatible and willing to work through difficulty. The avoidant is realizing they hit the jackpot and threw it away because they were too scared to accept it. This recognition makes every previous loss pale in comparison because those were losses of maybes. This is a loss of an actual good thing they experienced and still rejected. The comparison also highlights how much harder this loss is to process because the avoidant can't use their usual coping strategies. In previous relationships, they could blame the other person or tell themselves it wasn't meant to be. But with you, they know the relationship could have worked if they'd been different. The loss is entirely on them, and that makes it impossible to find comfort in their defensive narratives. The avoidant is experiencing undefended grief for the first time, and it's overwhelming. They're feeling the full weight of loss without any protective stories to soften the impact. The identity crisis catalyst. Losing you is forcing the avoidant to question their entire identity and approach to relationships. They've always believed their patterns were necessary, that their distance was healthy independence, that their unavailability protected them from harm. But the outcome of losing you contradicts all these beliefs. Their patterns didn't protect them. They destroyed the one relationship that could have worked. The avoidant is experiencing a crisis where their defensive identity is revealed as maladaptive rather than protective. Everything they believed about themselves and relationships is being challenged by the reality of this loss. The crisis includes the avoidant confronting that they might need to fundamentally change who they are. Not just tweak behaviors, but restructure their entire approach to intimacy and vulnerability. This level of change is terrifying because it means admitting that the person they've been for years or decades has been wrong. The avoidant built an identity around not needing anyone, and losing you proves that identity was a lie they told themselves. They do need connection. They did need you, and their refusal to acknowledge these needs cost them the relationship. This realization dismantles their self-concept and leaves them uncertain about who they are or who they need to become. The identity crisis also means the avoidant can't just move forward with their usual patterns. They're too aware now of where those patterns lead. Every time they start to withdraw from someone new, they'll remember losing you. Every time they prioritize their defenses over connection, they'll know exactly what that choice costs. The avoidance patterns have become visible to them in ways that make unconscious repetition impossible. They either have to do the painful work of change or consciously choose to keep destroying relationships, knowing exactly what they're doing. Either path is difficult, and this difficulty is the L they're taking. They lost their unconscious comfort with their patterns along with losing you. The regret that serves no purpose. The avoidant is drowning in regret, but the regret changes nothing. They see clearly now what they should have done differently. They should have been more present. They should have met your vulnerability with their own instead of withdrawal. They should have appreciated what they had while they had it. But this clarity comes too late to save the relationship or undo the damage. The regret is pure pain with no redemptive purpose. It doesn't lead to reconciliation because you've moved on. It doesn't make them feel better because it only highlights their failures. The regret just sits there, a constant reminder of what they lost and why. This purposeless regret is part of what makes this L so big. In other losses, the avoidant could at least learn something or tell themselves it made them stronger. But this loss just makes them aware of how they sabotage themselves without providing any clear path forward. Even if they change completely, they can't get you back. Even if they become capable of healthy relationship, they've already lost their best chance at one. The regret teaches them what they did wrong, but offers no opportunity to apply the lesson where it matters most. They're stuck with the knowledge of their mistakes and no way to correct them. The purposeless regret also means the avoidant will carry this L into every future relationship. They'll always know they had something real with you and they destroyed it. This knowledge will haunt them when they're with someone new, because they'll be comparing every new person to you and finding them lacking. They'll be wondering if they're making the same mistakes again. They'll be trying to avoid repeating patterns while knowing that patterns are deeply ingrained and difficult to change. The L they took isn't just about losing you. It's about losing their innocence about their own patterns and living with the awareness of their capacity to destroy good things.